Hey, welcome everyone. It's Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies. This is a point of view case study with Larisa Noonan, who was in my mentorship program. And I'm very excited about this. I really enjoy doing all of these point of view case studies. And so, Larisa, maybe I'll sort of introduce you, and if I get anything wrong, you can correct me on this. But Larisa joined my mentorship program. My memory is, it's so funny how terrible my memory is on this stuff, but she was doing a lot of ancestral healing work, and it had a fairly generic application or broad application, as generic as ancestral healing work can be. But as we were doing our work on the ideal client, there was just a line sort of buried in there about people who had grown up in fundamentalist Christian homes, and that this had kind of fucked up their life. And I said, oh, was that your story? Yeah. What percentage of your clients are this? Probably 80%. Would you be happy if 80% of your clients were this? Yeah, that'd be great. And so then we decided to at least roll with that for a while and see how that went. Larisa went to her husband, Paul, and said, oh, I think the niche is going to be focused on people who grew up in, fundamentalist Christian homes and messed up their childhood, or messed up their life. And her husband, Paul, said, I could have told you that. Keeping in mind, they've been married together for a long time. He knew she was struggling with his niche, and he hadn't said shit. So anyway, so that it came to be the niche, and then a lot of beautiful work has come since. So what you're going to see today from the point of view is very specifically on that journey, the point of view, the journey from I had that kind of childhood to I'm more liberated. And I guess the specific niche was people who they wanted to be a witchy healer. They were drawn to this mucking about in paganry and dirt worshipping heathens, and they but how can you do that when you have the fear of burning in hell? Very difficult to do. And so Larisa helps people, as at least one of the main focuses on contending with that. So Larisa, did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong there?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to have you here. And so that got clear of what the niche was, which of course allowed the point of view to become clear, because it gave some basis for it. And what you'll see is her work around that. And I'm just curious, how was once we got the niche clear, how was the point of view work for you? I recall there was quite a process, and there was a lot of back and forth and trying to figure it out and what was what. And but how was that process for you?
I think we came down to like 130 pages, 130 page document working on this. And then I'm still in this process of sorting through it and figuring out like what is actually core POV versus what is just like the way I see things that supplements in, like what are blog posts versus actually an ebook that would concisely summarize it. And I still don't have all that nailed. So, maybe we'll get to some of that today.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amen. Boy, the point of view thing, it's ongoing. It really is. You do get to a point where something clicks, but there's always more, and hopefully it just becomes more and more coherent over time. So, okay, so Larisa, are you able? Oh, let me make you one of them co-host things. And okay, so do you have any of those images ready to share?
I do.
So maybe I'll just kind of turn it over to you at this point, and you can walk us through, and I'll pause as needed, but you can show us what you got.
Okay, great. So I just got back from a 2-week road trip, and I'm really like trying to pivot into thinking in all these ways again after 2 weeks of family and driving for it's like 64 hours. So
what you're going to see, by the way, as Larisa's pulling this up, is I believe a lot of the maps Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about point of view marketing, there's this point of view pyramid where there's the tip of it is the route here, the steps you take people through. Then there's the core principles, and then there's the map, which is the hardest part. Some of you were at Ingrid Lil's session that she did, kind of drawing things out visually. So what you're about to see is the visual representation of Larisa's work. And as we're going through, no doubt your mind will be going to your own, what would this be for you? So hopefully this will give you some inspiration of just another example of what this could look like.
Great. So this is my map B. I'm actually going to skip forward to map A.
Okay.
And this is where people generally are when they first encounter me in my work. They are this person here in the center who I call the Witchy Healer. And they're really struggling to give their gifts into the world, especially in a way that allows them to be prosperous and to do it in a way that's sustainable for them. So those two pieces of sustainability and actually prospering while doing it are a big struggle. And as you see the Witchy Healer in the center here, there's these 4 trees branching out from them. And those represent their ancestors. So in the work that I do there, we start by focusing on what we call our 4 primary lines. So our mother's lines, mother's fathers, fathers' fathers, and fathers' mothers' lines. And so those are the representation of the ancestors in this image. And as you can see, the trees are pretty sparse. They don't look very healthy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But here in the center surrounding the Witchy Healer, you will notice all of this. Where's my cursor? All of these like bubbles, this darkness, or what I call fog. And this fog is representing all the trauma that lives within the ancestral lines of the person and that lives within the culture at large. And it's all kind of pressing in on the Witchy Healer. So the Witchy Healer is kind of connected to their ancestors, but mostly to a little bit of health. There is a little bit of health in those trees, but also to a large amount of trauma and pain that has not been acknowledged and has not been healed. And then they're also being pressed in by the culture at large. And in this case, if you grow up in a fundamentalist Christian community like I did, a lot of that trauma results in the pattern of fundamentalism. And I want to just broaden it a little bit because a lot of the people that I work with actually didn't grow up with Christian fundamental in a Christian fundamentalist home, but they're recognizing how this pattern of fundamentalism plays out in their life nonetheless, because our culture at large, as I see it, is a culture of fundamentalism.
Can we just pause on that? Where else do you see examples? Like, what are other examples of fundamentalism that maybe people wouldn't necessarily see as fundamentalism until it's pointed out?
Can I give my definition of fundamentalism to start with? So I define fundamentalism as a pattern of thoughts, of behaviors, of physical sensations in the body that arise out of unresolved trauma, that attempt to create a sense of safety, of control, and of belonging in order to mitigate the feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, fear, and pain that unresolved trauma perpetuates.
Larisa, I've never heard that from you before. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and even the more important part of this even is that, as I see it, fundamentalism arises over generations. It doesn't just all of a sudden you wake up one day and boom, you're a fundamentalism and you're seeing the world in this really black-white way. Whereas before you saw nuance and you saw shades of color. It doesn't happen that way. It's a pattern that has happened over generations, which is why in my work, it's so important to include the ancestors and ancestral healing if we want to really recover from the pain of growing up in a fundamentalist culture or community.
So let's just pause for a second, because here's something I really want to flag for people. This isn't something that's funny. I should probably actually make a note to add this to the point of view document, but how we define words is a part of the point of view. Different, the way I define niche, your role in the community is very different from how my colleagues define it. And this is one of these things where somebody could be in a course with Larisa and say, well, so wait, what is fundamentalism? And if she doesn't have an answer for that, if there's a word that's very central to your work, if somebody says, Tad, how do you define marketing? It's very central to my work. For Kalita, who's on the call with us, with showgirlawakening.com, who I also did a point of view case study with, you can check out. If somebody said, well, how are you defining burlesque? How are you defining showgirl? What does that mean? Then, or embodiment, whatever the core words are, it really is useful to what do I mean by that word? How am I defining it? What is my understanding of that word, that concept? So there's definitions, but there's also sort of what do you believe about that? So you just heard an example of a belief, which I would put in that second level of point of view, the compass, the top, ideas, where, so on the map, there's fundamentalism. But with any map, the map is it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. There's nothing in this amazing map that Larisa's created that is saying anything should happen. It's just saying this is how it is, present time. This is the reality. There's no shoulds in it. There's no supposed to's in it. It's like this right now. And so it's like we see this fog, we see this fundamentalism. And then she said, oh, and it's intergenerational. So that's a belief about it. And one of the ways you can get to that as an exercise is, you could say, regarding fundamentalism, I believe, and then you just finish that sentence over and over again. Just sit there, set a timer for 20 minutes and just keep finishing that sentence. And then you start to get a sense of what your core point of view is about that. So that can be another way in. What are the most important elements in my work? So in this, we see ancestors. So there could be beliefs about ancestors, which I know we talked about. There's beliefs about trauma. There's beliefs about fundamentalism. What's the relationship between trauma and fundamentalism? There's, and more things on the map. So, anything you have on the map, you could just say, okay, what do I believe about that? Because the more coherent our thoughts are on these things, the more just coherent will be, the better articulated this all is in our mind, the more articulate we'll be in front of people, the more, it just all has a coherence to it. And that coherence is what develops the trust. Because if somebody's like, what do you think about fundamentalism? I don't know. It's probably something about the ground somewhere. I'm not sure. It'd be like, okay, I'm not working with you. Versus that kind of answer that she gave, I was like, man, I just wanted her to say that again and talk about that for half an hour. Because it's very clear, she's clear that every single word in that phrase she gave was paying its rent. There was no filler in that definition. So anyway, I just wanted to flag that. Whatever the core elements are, worthwhile thinking, what do you believe about those things? Because it may be different from what your colleagues believe. It may be different from what's in the industry. And that's great, because people want to know what you think. They don't want to know what the academics think. Or some people do, but mostly if people are in pain and they're coming to you, it's like, well, I'm going to work with you. You'll be helping me. So what do you believe? And this is the filtering, and people can then decide if it's a fit or not. So anyway, I just wanted to linger over that for a second.
Thanks. Yeah. So you were asking me where else I see fundamentalism in culture at large. I have people who I work with who actually grew up in atheist families and who are fundamentalist atheists.
Right.
I see it in a lot of people's approach to nutrition and to diets. Like, you have to be a vegan or you're a bad person, or you have to eat meat and only raw milk or you're a bad person. It's any time where you start seeing those judgments, the good, bad, the right, wrong, that sort of the us versus the other, you can know that fundamentalism is at play.
Thank you.
And if you think about, if everybody just takes a moment to think about the current state of the world, there's probably tons of examples that will leap to your mind within 10 seconds. Yeah, so just, yeah, to continue a little bit here with the fundamentalist piece and the way I see it showing up. I see fundamentalism as being characterized by judgment, by rigidity, by a stark black-white view of the world. You could also call that the binary oppositional mindset, where, so again, back to the good, evil, right, wrong, man, woman, sinner, saint, but where the two extremes aren't just on a spectrum. One is actually situated as superior to the other. And so, like in a fundamentalist culture, it's generally better to be a man than a woman. You want to go to heaven, you don't want to go to hell, and on like that. And again, this is a result of unresolved trauma, and this placing of the world into right or wrong is an attempt to counter fear and to control others, to control ourselves, to control the world in order to feel safe. The problem is that it leads to othering, it leads to polarization, to judgment, and to persecution of ourselves and of others, and of ourselves. And one of the big, yeah, go ahead. And another characteristic that I want to mention that I see really prominent within fundamentalist cultures is an attachment to being right that takes over at the expense of our values of being a loving and a kind person. And this happens in really small ways and really big ways. You know, like for instance, if I'm in an argument with my spouse and I'm absolutely convinced that I'm right, I can lose sight of him as a person, and I can forget that I actually love him and that I want to be in a harmonious relationship, and instead just be utterly trying to convince him of my rightness and overrun him. But yeah, so I could keep talking about fundamentalism, or I could keep expanding into the map. Where do you want me to go with this?
Sorry, I was muted. Let's keep going into the map.
Okay.
But the thing I want to flag is, notice that Larisa could keep talking about fundamentalism. She could keep going on and riffing on that for a while in an extremely lucid way, that any single part of this map she could talk about for quite a while. So consider this as, you know, if she's doing an intro workshop, you can have multiple maps, but she could just have that one thing up on the wall, and she could spend a week delving into this, talking about, doing exercise on this, being guided by this. So it's extraordinary. Yeah, so please keep going.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. So the next piece of the map, we have the Witchy Healer again. I keep losing my cursor. Then we have the fog, and we have the ancestral trees. And then we have this realm, which is the scene or the natural world. And so you see there's like different plants and animals and fungi in that realm. And what's important to notice here is that there's a distinct delineation between the culture and the scene and natural world. There's a separation. And this is a result of trauma, of fundamentalism as well. Like everything is separated and has their own boxes, and we no longer see the natural world as sacred, because, well, that opens up another whole doorway that maybe I won't go into right now. I'll just keep focused on the map here. So this is the realm of the unseen, and then over here, of the realm of the seen or the natural world. And then this outer layer is the unseen or the others world. And so this is where, you know, all the tree and plant spirits are. This is where the gods are and the goddesses. This is where, you know, Jesus and Mary are. And if you're of that inclination, everything that we can't see but that exists parallel to this world or intertwined with this world is just the flip side of this world, is that it exists in this realm. And again, there is that separation, that clear delineation between realms. And again, you'll notice that all this fog is blocking the Witchy Healer from being able to access the support that's in the natural world, and being able to, and also blocking the support from the unseen world. And as I see it, the ancestors are connecting our bridges into these worlds, and they're not healthy either. So even these ones who would be able to help us connect in and receive support and guidance and know that we belong and that we're part of a greater whole, aren't healthy enough to help us there, help us access that and know that. And so the witchy healers in the center are just alone and isolated and confused. And perhaps they do receive messages from spirit, and perhaps they can be out in nature and commune with a tree, but they are often distrustful of the messages that they receive. Or if they receive messages, then they might go and seek external validation for those. And if what other people say doesn't match up with the messages that they receive, they're more likely to trust the other person. Or if they do receive messages and they trust them, the messages tend to be inconsistent or tenuous, like the connection isn't fully strong and steady.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this took Larisa a year or two to do this. She put in the time. It's incredible.
So should we spiral in on the witchy healer herself a little bit next?
Do it.
Okay. So this is the Venn of the witchy healer. And there's the mind, the emotions, and the body, which is what I see as making up, or the components of the witchy healer. And for my people, they tend to have done a lot of healing work prior to encountering me in my work. They've been on a healing path for a while. Like it's in their DNA to be seeking healing, to be seeking wholeness, to be seeking spirit. Yeah. And they've tried different modalities and different approaches to healing. They've tried approaches that are more based in the mind, like maybe talk therapy. They've tried approaches that are more based in the emotions, which, let's see, off the top of my head, I don't have this at my fingertips, but anyway, approaches that are more emotionally based, like maybe grief therapies or ceremonies or things like that.
Rebirthing, primal scream.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And they've tried things that are more centered in the body, like nutrition and diets and physical exercise and sex and all these different things as approaches to becoming more whole. And while it's likely that all of these things, and then of course there's huge overlaps where maybe they've tried things like somatic experiencing that are like mind and body and emotions all kind of happening at the same time, but still they haven't made the progress that they wanted. And what they've been missing, so here, mind, body, emotions. And the center of this Venn, as I see it, is where the spirit of the witchy healer can really land in their body. And our spirits can land most easily in our body, when the mind, body, and emotions then are harmonious. And if they're not in harmony, then our attempts to do spiritual work and to heal in those ways tend to take more the form of spiritual bypassing, or of like peak experiences where you're consistently looking for the next hit, but not really doing the time, putting in the time and going through the mess and the pain that it takes to really integrate healing experiences into your daily life. And so even when these are all in harmony, this person themselves still might not be in the state of wholeness that they want to be. And that's because they have forgotten about the ancestors. And not just the ancestors themselves, but the state of wellness of the ancestors. Are the ancestors well and vibrant? Or are they stuck in some unresolved pain and trauma themselves, and then that unresolved pain and trauma is flowing to the person? Because no matter, this is a strong point of view or a strong belief of mine, like no matter how much we do on the individual level, if our ancestors are not also well, we are still going to be stuck in some really profound ways, because that trauma is still going to be flowing to us. And we might be healthier, we might be more whole, but we're not going to be able to live to our fullest potential if our ancestors aren't also well. So that's the overview of the Venn.
Amazing. Larisa, this is so good. Are there any other maps to show us? Because I think there's the healthy map then.
There is. So there again is the unhealthy one. And this is the healthy one. And I can show you side by side here if that's helpful.
Oh, wow. Look at this. So great.
So yeah, the map on the left is where people start out, and then the map on the right is where people, what's the potential, and my vision for the people who I work with, and where people actually begin to grow into, to heal into. And so let me go back to just the big one here. So in this map, notice, just looking at it, as I look at it right now, the thing that I notice most is just the feeling of spaciousness in it. Everything's not compressed into these little segregated realms. But predominantly the ancestors are now well. The trees are full and vibrant and healthy. The roots, the gifts, the blessings from the ancestral lines are fully connected into the person, the witchy healer in the center. There is also protection surrounding the person. The ancestors are there to act as protectors and guides. The trauma, the fog of trauma surrounding the person is much lessened. There's still some there because trauma is just a facet of life. So there's always going to be some trauma, but how we heal from it and whether we heal from it depends so much on the ecosystem and within which we're embedded. In this case, the witchy healer is embedded in a very healthy ecosystem. So then the segregation, the lines separating the witchy healer from the natural world, from the unseen world, are no longer there. She, they, him are now fully, they have access to all the different realms at the same time, all the support, like they know, they can feel that they belong and that they are a part of the greater web of life. They aren't alone anymore. They have the support that they need to be able to do the work that they're here to do in a really good way. Any questions about that?
Yeah, let's open it up to questions. Yeah, what do you, and just any questions, reflections. Feel free to, unmute yourself if you like. Nico, go ahead.
Yeah, I really like your maps, like the tree maps really speak to me. The only thing for me is that the first one that actually expresses like a negative state of not being healed, if I see it by itself, it's too nice for me. If I see it in relationship to the other one, I can see the process of the other one being more healed. But if I see that at first, I actually find it very nice, and it doesn't express for me all the negative connotations of being stuck in that fog and stuff. So maybe there is a way to make it clearer. Maybe no leaves and the fog also for me is not clear that the little dots are something negative. So I like it too much in order to be something negative.
Thank you, Nico. Do you have any suggestions for, I guess you just gave some, maybe no leaves and more fog or something?
No leaves, and the fog being something more unpleasant, maybe like more gray. The first thing that would come to my mind is like gray clouds or something. And maybe also the separations, doing it with something that's associated with more negative emotions. The circles are very nice. And once you explain it to me, I can understand, okay, that's separated and the next one is not. But at first, I have very positive associations with the circles. So if there could be little spines to the inside to the person or something like that, would make it clearer to me that this is actually a negative image and the other one is the nice one.
Thank you, Nico. With the trees, I do need some leaves on that because our ancestors aren't fully unwell either. There is health in our lines. Like we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be alive in these bodies today if our ancestors weren't healthy enough to have children and for us to actually be here. And so
I just got into dead trees. I just got into cultivating plants, and sometimes when it doesn't work well, there's little holes in the leaves. Maybe something like that could work.
Okay, thank you, Nico. I appreciate that.
I'm just wondering as well whether you could have some of the trees with leaves on and some of them without, Larisa, you know, to kind of just so that you're drawn to the fact that, hold on a minute, that it looks very coherent at the moment and very symmetrical, you know, whereas actually if you're looking at it and actually it feels a little bit icky, and when you're looking at it going, oh, there's some trees there with no leaves on it, it might be some questions that that draw you in as well. And I think perhaps kind of the lines between them, you know, the lines, the circle lines between them may be a bit stronger, you know, as like there is a definite kind of separation. Because, you know, when you explain it, it makes perfect sense. But, you know, I think just to kind of draw out the things that you said about that separation, you know, I mean, I absolutely love it, but I think it could be even a stronger image. I think that's probably true, actually, in terms of drawing you into it being looking more negative. Because at the moment, it does look really beautiful. It does look beautiful, but when you see it in comparison to the other one, you can kind of see the difference, which is great, but maybe just make the difference much stronger as well. And the only other question that I had is when you showed the Venn diagram, for me, I wanted to see spirit in there. Well, so mind, emotions, body, and spirit, because I do, because you did make reference to it, which was brilliant, about the spiritual bypassing that people can do. And I think that's so huge in this work, that spiritual bypassing and being able to go into to do spiritual work thinking that you're doing the work when really you're bypassing you know, you're bypassing the real work by going into the kind of. And actually for me as well, kind of from my own experience, you know, when you sometimes go into the spiritual world, you hit the fundamentalism again, don't you?
Yes.
You hit it. I mean, you know, and I've put it on the chat, but I'm like kind of going, oh my God, yeah, there's everything you say about fundamentalism. When I look up the word, it's all about religion, but it isn't. And so, you know, that I think that is so powerful in what you're saying. And I love this idea of you tell me what fundamentalism means, because when you talk about it, I go, I get it. That makes so much sense. That's so alive for me in how I see the world at the moment and what's happening. So, you know, but we don't see it because we kind of go, oh, well, I'm not religious, or I don't go to church, or, oh, my mum and dad weren't religious. It's like, it's in the fabric. It's not whether you went to church or not, and so on. So I love that aspect of it. But I think putting spiritual in there will grab those people who think they've done the spiritual work. Do you know what I mean? Because you're offering something more than that spiritual work. You're going beyond that for me, which is where the power of what you're doing is.
So would you suggest like just labeling spirit in the center in some way, or
maybe having another, I don't know whether that would completely, because
change
the whole thing, but have another circle with spirits in it.
Okay.
You know, find the word. I think the word needs to be in there somewhere, so that, you know, for me, I've done a lot of spiritual work and found myself back to square one because I'm still dealing with fundamentalism.
Yeah.
In the spiritual world.
Interestingly, I just want to disagree with that and say, for me, I'm really pleased that spirit is just because the spirit of the ancestors is what we're connecting with in there. That ancestors represents the spirit for me there. Just to offer that as a counterbalance.
Yeah, I just want to pause here, because this is the interesting thing. So we've heard Larisa's point of view, and now we're hearing other people's point of view about the point of view coming out. So of course this is, you know, Larisa's, she'll come to whatever makes sense from this, but that's just the thing to notice, that's what's happening right now, is I see your point of view, and here's my point of view about it. Here's how I see that same thing. So a few thoughts here. One is Larisa, can you go back to the two side by side? Okay, so part of this is because I do hear the comment that the first one looks too pretty, the bad one looks too pretty perhaps, but it's also, this is so much about the point of view and the framing itself of it, because it's answering feedback, because Larisa might say, as you look at that, it doesn't look so bad, does it? It actually looks okay. It's pretty, you know, it's a nice image. But that's how it is in life. It often looks good in life. We don't mind. You get used to it. We really do get accustomed to this stuff. You know, we grow up in, you know, most of our ancestors lived in this indigenous way. And then we, you know, eventually we live in these cities full of pollution, and you can get attached to that. You can really fall in love with that and think, oh, that's beautiful. But, you know, compared to how it is supposed to be for you. Anyways, that could itself be a teaching in the image. Yeah, is that. Yeah. And so I'm curious, Larisa, Zena brought up, you know, just where does the spirit fit, and what is your understanding of that? How does spirit fit into, or does it fit into that, the Witchy Healer event? What's been your sense of it?
Yeah, let me go back to this one. So yeah, the spirit is the way I think about spirit in relation to this Venn is I think about it as actually being the spirit of the Witchy Healer themselves. That enters the Venn. And another one of the hallmarks of fundamentalism is disembodiment, where our spirit, our awareness, and this is also a hallmark of trauma, isn't actually fully in our bodies, because the trauma is where the trauma lives in our bodies. And so, of course, it's a painful and uncomfortable place for our spirits to be. So we tend to dissociate, to not actually be fully landed in our bodies to the fullness that is possible. And so as we're doing this work, as we're doing the work with the mind, the body, the emotions, and especially as we start doing the work with the ancestors, it makes it possible for more and more of our spirits to fully enter into our physical bodies. And you know, for us to shine, for us to actually be our most authentic, loving, true selves, and to be able to give our gifts into the world while knowing that we're protected, while knowing that we belong, while knowing that it's safe for us to do this. And so I really look at in this Venn, the spirit is very personal to the Witchy Healer themselves.
Yeah. Do you see that is the spirit the overlap, the result of those three circles? Or is it, yeah, I'm curious how you would, is this the spirit that centerpiece then?
I think the spirit is distinct, actually. I see that like we are here in these physical bodies, and then there's also that force that animates these physical bodies, and that's what I'm calling spirit. Just like there's the trees, and there's also the force that animates those trees. So I'm coming from an animist perspective that spirit lives and comes through more than just human people, living human people. So there's the trees, there's the tree people, there's the water people, there's the mountain people, and us as human people sometimes have a hard time. Like trees can just be trees and be their spirits fully manifested through them. I see it that we as human peoples, due to trauma and probably other things as well, have a hard time really having our spirits landed fully in our bodies. And it is through doing the trauma healing, it is through doing the ancestral healing that our bodies become safe enough and open enough for our spirits to fully land and for us to become truly animated in the people that we are meant to be, versus kind of these controlling shells that are being dominated more from our head and from reason and from logic and from trying to control everything.
And if you had to write the word spirit in this diagram, where would it go?
That's what I'm struggling with, seeing where that would happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's something about like having it as a fourth circle that doesn't quite feel right for you.
Yeah, it might even just like be right in the center of the person, like just spirit, right there, perhaps. Yeah.
Right. And is it possible that then the spirit expresses itself through the mind, the body, the emotions?
Yes.
Yeah, as a kind of inside out, not a outside in. It's not like the mind, body, emotions come together as the spirit. The spirit expresses itself in those three ways. And then maybe if there's blocks in those three, then this stymies the spirit in some way.
Then the what? What did you say at the end there?
Stymies the spirit in some way.
Stymies. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I see it that way.
Okay. Good. So this is such an important thing, and I would just say for everyone who's well, in all of your work with clients, and if you're doing marketing coaching, particularly, it's so important to be drawing out how does the person themselves see it. Yeah, it's I know for myself, one of my I can get very excited about ideas for my clients and a perspective, and try to shoehorn it in, and but it's so important to how do you see it? Where would this fit? How do you see these things relating? Are all good questions to be asking our clients. Yeah, so beautiful, Larisa. This is really beautiful. Now, Ingrid had a question, which I thought was a very good question. She said, was this clear for you? Was all of this clear for you before you did the visuals, or did the visuals process of creating the visuals make it clearer?
I'm more of I tend to write things out more than I draw things out. So for me, it kind of came through writing first, and then I really struggled turning it into like finding a visual representation of what I was like sensing or feeling or trying to describe with words. And then, yeah, so then like I had the words, and then we started playing with graphics, and then it kind of went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So kind of both. It wasn't really, and then, yeah, because then once I had the graphic, more things began to become revealed through the graphic itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, that was my experience of it from the outside. Helping you through this was I remember you would send me images, and I'd say, but wait, that doesn't make any sense. Or wait, but then where's this thing? This really important element. It's just not even in the image. And then where's how does this relate? If that's here, if that's inside of this, then there were a lot of things that visually didn't make sense. And I remember, I remember very frustrating, like, wait, but I remember we had to just put it to rest for some time and like go back to other things and then come back to it and try it again. And which is why I'm so, amazed with what you've come up with here, because I know how much work you put into this. Are there any other questions? Things you look at these, let's go back to the two maps. And as you look at them, is there anything that's like that you're wondering about, you're curious about, that doesn't make sense to you? Anything else you'd like to know? Ingrid, I'd love to just hear any of your reflections, because I know you help people with this visual drawing things out, mapping things.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this here. And I say, don't worry about the details of the drawings, if this is too pretty or not pretty. This is not what it's about. It's about the wholeness, and it will never stand alone. It's also an image that gives you kind of a background to talk, something to talk about. So it's always together with words. And you could make the dots darker if you want. Then they would look more dangerous. I'm interested in the process. My opinion is, my point of view is, if you can't draw it, then it's not clear. But maybe it's not true for everybody. And that's something that I try to find out, if it's only me and my clients, or if it's maybe a general thing. I think it was Donald Miller or somebody who said, if you can paint a picture of your message, it's not clear enough, which got me started on this whole thing. But I don't know if it's true for everybody. Did you just do it because Ted said you should, or?
Pretty much, yeah. When I was first drawing it out, I had the different rings of the different realms, and then I had like all the words for what belonged in each realm versus the pictures.
Yeah.
And so even that, it was kind of like a combination of words and a little bit of a picture. And then actually we had the trees were difficult. Like initially we were talking about bridges and about pathways and yeah, the trees only came through at the end when I was starting to actually work with a designer on it. And I'm like, no, these have to be trees. And so, then I drew out actually just a really crude picture of like, the 4 trees and the different realms so that she at least knew what I meant with the trees. And that was probably, when it really finally clicked for me, like how everything came together.
So it did click, and how useful is it now to have this visual?
Oh, it's very useful. This is my first time actually like presenting it publicly and talking about it publicly. So I can't tell you, like, I don't have a lot of like lived experience of how useful it is within other settings, but for me to just be able to have these visuals and to know what each thing represents and how they work together and to be able to point at things as I'm talking about them, it's amazing.
I have to transcribe this. This can go directly on my sales page.
Right. It's true. Well, Ingrid, I would just say my opinion is I would agree with that assessment. If you can't draw it, it's not clear. If you can't visually represent it, it's not clear. Because I think if you really understand it, you could actually draw it a bunch of different ways. You could probably do a bunch of different metaphors for the same thing. This is where I think sometimes people get stuck, is they got one metaphor for their work, and that's the only story they tell about it. And when somebody doesn't get that particular analogy, they're like, they'll say, yes, the business model way, it's like a leaky bucket. I don't get it. Yeah, it's like there's a hole in a container and it's leaking. It's like, but could you wait? What's fundamentalism? It's when you're fundamentalist about things. You people define with the same definition. They use the same analogy over and over again. And I do think part of we know where we're getting it. It's like, oh, that metaphor doesn't work. Let me give you another one. Here's another example. I think that does become a sign. Of course, there's just metaphors that work better. I mean, I love this. The trees, the roots protecting the person like that around them. It's visually so clear. I see it against the other one. It's like, oh man, wow, that the ancestors do that. Oh, I see. And it's so clear. But yeah, I think, so I would just say for everyone, this is, try doodling it out. Try drawing it. Look for the inconsistencies. What's not working? I mean, it's interesting what Nico was saying about the leaves and like, yeah, maybe the holes in some of the leaves. It's interesting. We can always improve these, because you can start to look at it and you can say, oh yeah, we could make that darker. We could make this, put holes here. We can, and the thing that's helpful, by the way, I said earlier, when Nico and when Zeno were sharing, they were sharing their point of view about it. And here's how I see it. This is so vital that this stuff does get shared, because sometimes this is the choice we'll all have. You'll share something and somebody will say, well, here's how I see it, or here's what's missing for me, or what is this? And I don't understand that. And then you'll have a choice of, because you might actually agree. I mean, I remember I was doing the Island A and B thing for a few years in a workshop, and somebody said, oh, it's like, there's so many different ways from Island A to Island B. They pointed that out. I'd never thought that thought before. And as soon as they said it, it was so obvious in the metaphor of going from one island to another. It's like, yeah, of course there would be. And then I stood there, I was like, now how does that relate to and the whole point of view work came out of it. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation now, is because somebody in a workshop, God bless them, spoke up and pushed back a little bit, or said, what about this? And here's something that I'm curious about. So, but you may also find somebody says something and you can't even figure out why, but you disagree with it. You say, no, it's not quite like that. And they say, no, it's absolutely that. It shouldn't be, it should be, I don't know. That font should be Comic Sans for sure. And you're like, I disagree with your aesthetic choice. Or that person in the center should have a witchy hat, or what, like, anyways, people will push back with details. And you may just find a visceral, like, no. But so what's great about that is that's where you get to figure out what you believe, because you've never had to think about it before. It's never crossed your mind before that somebody would see it differently. And so this is the beauty, is the more we share it, what we articulate articulates, partly because in speaking it, you have to think it through, but also because in speaking it, you get feedback from other people. In speaking it, people will push back, which is good. They'll say, that doesn't make sense. They'll say, it would be better like this. And either you think, you're right, that would be better, I'm going to make that change right now. Or you think, no, not that, because of this. Here's why. And that might be aesthetically, philosophically, but the more we can become rooted in our own perspective and our own point of view, the more trustworthy we become, I think. That there's a reason we do it. But so the simple version, Larisa, it took a couple of years into doing all this, but you can just doodle stuff out and start sharing it with people. So what does he think about this? Does this make any sense in a workshop? Here's a doodle, a new one I'm working on. What do you think? And in the conversation with people, this is where it starts to be a bit clearer. And, if you watch the session with Ingrid Lil, when she was doing this doodling with somebody, and she's got a number on her website, there's a lot of that iterative, wait, so are you saying this? Is it more like this or this? And she's doing the coaching. But of course, we're sort of getting that coaching from people all the time in an audience so just keep sharing it. It's so helpful. It does add detail to it. It might shift your point of view or shift what's in the image, or it might strengthen it. You say, no. And then it becomes a teaching point in a workshop. I really do think in the workshop, you could say, this is pretty, this first one. I know, I hired a designer. It's gorgeous. I love it. So you think that it's not so bad, but wait. Let me show you this one. This is how it ought to be. This is how humans evolve. This is, and then people, I see, right. That one didn't look so bad, but in comparison to this one, it does. And just like in my life right now, maybe I'm settling for something that's so much less than it could be. And boy, what would it even be like to live in this kind of world? So, yes, okay, so Zena is saying, I love the idea. That's an image you used to talk about. Yeah, and I would agree with Ingrid. Most of the time, these images don't. It is good that people can look at it and see something and could have their own thoughts about it. But it's more, we start talking about it and it becomes this, but the key is we start talking about it, we share it with people, the image has to stand up. It has to make sense. Because if we were to look at this and say, but wait, I don't know, the trees are backwards, like the leaves are in the center and the roots are on the outside. This doesn't seem to make sense or maybe it would in another way, but it just has to be consistent. And Zena said, knowing you, Larisa, this feels so authentically you. It's so beautiful. I'd love to know the step-by-step process that you take people through, right? Because that's another part of point of view. Maybe we can go to that. And Susan was saying, I've been drawing everything for my work since last week's point of view workshop. There's a stack of pictures on my desk right now. And it's kind of funny that I hadn't done that before, because I do that constantly throughout every session for my clients around their situation and processes, the whole map diagram thing itself. It's so true. It's, these visuals, and they can be very simple. I think about you see a lot of indigenous tribes have the 4 circles in North America anyways, or the circle with in the pie, the red, yellow, white, and black or blue, depending on where you're at. And you would look at that and you could surmise a few things, but there's so much in it that isn't written out in words, but it's all, the reminders are all there. Larisa, do you have a sense of the step-by-step? Because we've really looked at the map. We've heard some of the compass and point of view. So if somebody came to you and they said, I'm so jacked up on fundamentalism and I just can't seem to kick it, and I'm realizing I am, and I should really work on this. Is there a process you take people through?
Yeah, I have 3 or 6 different threads that I weave together when I work with people. And the first one is just awareness, because unless you're aware that this is at the root of some of your problems, some of what's keeping you stuck, you're not going to be willing or want to do anything about it. So, you know, actually just gaining awareness of what fundamentalism is and how it plays out in your life and in the world around you is crucial. And this is awareness that continues to build. And so these steps aren't linear. They kind of tend to like intertwine and fold back on themselves. And like, you know, you're going to be gaining awareness throughout every other step that you're taking or throughout every piece that you're doing. The second one is what I call skillfulness. And this is where you begin to learn how to really come back into your body in safe and gentle ways. So it's embodiment skills. It's also boundary skills, learning what boundaries are and how to enact them in healthy and flexible and useful ways. And it's also starting to gain skills about what it is to be an animist, how it is to relate to the world around you as if the world around you is alive if you don't already. So I would say those are the three skills that we're gaining throughout, that we're constantly working on throughout the entire process. The next thread is working with your well ancestors, like starting to become, we all have well ancestors, even if maybe the recent generations are more troubled, or maybe many generations are deeply troubled or slightly troubled. We all do have well ancestors too at some point in our lives. And so it's starting to get to know them and being in relationship with them and starting to work with them to bring healing to all those generations that aren't so well and that are still stuck in unresolved trauma. Because as long as our ancestors aren't well, again, we're always going to be the recipient of that unresolved trauma. It's going to keep showing up in our bodies. It's going to keep showing up in our lives. And it's going to make our own healing much more difficult. The fourth one is starting to look specifically at that pattern of fundamentalism and how it has played out through our lineages and starting to bring healing to that. So it's kind of a deeper level of healing for our ancestral lineages and for ourselves. The fifth thread then is, you know, for those of us, most of my people are healers in some capacity. And I define healer pretty generally, pretty broadly as just a person who seeks to bring more cohesion, more coherence, more love into the world through being who they truly are. Like that to me is a healer. A healer can be doing anything, that what they're doing externally doesn't matter. It's more who they are and that commitment to being on a path that allows for them to continuing to become more whole, because that radiates, and that's healing for the world right there. And so the fifth thread is being in relationship with those who were healers of your ancestors. And if you have any healing gifts, you have ancestors who were healers, and really letting them mentor you and what it means to be a healer that is connected to the earth, in relationship with the earth and with our other than human kin, and starting to bring those ancient technologies into the modern world where we're so disconnected from those ways of living and those ways of being. And then the final thread is to actually just be doing your work in the world, to be, you know, witching it up and be your witchy self, and to just continue cycling through these steps in ways that continue to allow you to step even more into who you are and into your gifts.
Beautiful. Now, is there a starting place with those threads, or do they all kind of come at the same time?
I would say, you know, the building the awareness is probably the starting point, because again, if you don't have that awareness, you're not going to be motivated to take any further steps. And then it's kind of a combination of building the skillfulness around learning some just foundational embodiment and boundary skills, and also starting to work with the ancestors, because so many of our issues with embodiment and boundaries is due to interference from our unwell ancestors, whether it's just their unresolved trauma and their lack of boundaries, or if there's actual unwell spirits who are close to us and have been interfering with us probably for our whole life. And so it's both, those two steps kind of intertwine. I teach basic embodiment and boundary skills for the person, and then we start working to bring healing to the ancestors so there's not that interference and that trauma coming to the person.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, so it's talking about representing things visually. The sort of image, and there's probably a better one, frankly, for this, but is, okay, so I sort of see a pyramid. And so it starts with, there's awareness. And then the kind of final, deeper step is this healing fundamentalism in your ancestors, is it?
Yeah, yes. So it would be like the awareness and then the skill building and the working with to just get general wellness through your ancestors, and then working with the pattern of fundamentalism specifically and entering into that mentoring like relationship with your ancestors. And then, you know, like just being your full witchy self and giving your gifts into the world in a way that is sustainable and that creates prosperity if that's what you're needing.
Right. So, I mean, okay, so this is very rough, but it's like almost like 3 level. Oh, wait, can you see me?
Maybe should I stop screen sharing so we can see you?
This one.
I'll stop screen sharing and then we'll be able to see you more.
So,
yeah. Yeah.
so you see there's 3 levels here. There's the awareness, there's the middle level, that's both the skills and the ancestors, and then there's this healing the patterns of fundamentalism. That's kind of the tip. Now you could flip it, and it's depending on how you want to do it. But it just seemed like, oh, the awareness is the foundation. But this could be concentric circles, and again, you could have this as like the center circle, then the circle on the outside divided in two sides of it, and then the other circle here, you know. So it doesn't have to be a pyramid. It can be, but it is helpful sometimes when you can, again, just as a map. So somebody comes and they say, well, I'm all messed up with fundamentalism. I want to be a witchy healer. I can't seem to get started. So, well, here's the approach. First thing we got to do is do this, and then we're going to work on this, and then eventually we'll get to here. There's something that you relax. You say, oh, there's a map. There's an approach here. There's a way to do this that builds the credibility and the trust in people, rather than just sort of like, well, you know, we riff on things. We're gonna have some sessions, gonna talk about some stuff, there's gonna be some ancestors in there, you're gonna learn some skills. And it's like, is there a process? Yeah, it's a riffing kind of jazz thing, which may be your thing, but this is very helpful to just orient people a little bit like, but wait, where do I even begin on this? Like, I don't even, it's so overwhelming. There's so many pieces to, where do I start? And what often happens, and I think this is a disservice, and it's not also as deeply honest as it could be, because we are opinionated creatures. Client says, but where do I start? That's the best part. You start wherever you want to start. Where do you think you should start? Do I have options? Hundreds. Let me give them to you all now. Here they are. What do you think you should do? And it can be overwhelming on the receiving end, versus like, I tell you what, here's where I think we begin with this. Because they're coming to us for guidance. You know, there are 3 things people need when they're in pain: empathy, context, and guidance. Those are the 3. Empathy, just like, well, that's shitty. I'm sorry to hear it. That sounds terrible. Context, that's the point of view. That's all the maps that Larisa so generously shared with us. Here's the context. Like, here's why it hurts, basically. Here's why you're in so much trouble. It's understandable given all these things. But that's not enough. I mean, that's cool as you read a book about it, but if somebody's paying us, then they want the guidance. It's like, but now what? You can't, it's not helpful to just say, well, the next step for you is to go from this map to this map. Yeah, so you're going to want you're going to want to get rid of these boundaries here, and you're going to want less fog. How do I start? Yeah, wherever you want. You see what I'm saying? It just gets daunting for people, and versus most important first step, in my professional opinion, your best fighting chance, you know, is that. And Nico was saying, so my point of view on the first image is, if you're going to use the image in combination with the second one in order to speak about your point of view, it's not necessary to make changes. I do think the holes and leaves is interesting as a thought. If you want to use it as a standalone image that makes people feel like, oh, this is where I'm at, it would be helpful to integrate things that make it clear this is island A, not island B. Yeah, I would agree. And I think my sense is it probably always will be used in concert. It'll never just be a separate thing. It'll be as a part of a larger presentation. Or by the way, this shit is killer in sales letters. My God, this kind of image, you know, is so good. And it's for people to like, see this and now see this. I'm like, let's walk you through it. Like, this can be real good in a presentation. It's great. You know, giving a talk, but also if you're interviewed and it's a video interview and you can have them to share these things, you can do a screen share just like this for a webinar. It's so helpful for people, because otherwise, you know how it is, you kind of, you hear a lot of words and you leave and somebody's like, how was the talk about the Larisa Noonan's talk? It was great. What did she talk about? Ancestors, or what were the big ideas? It's hard sometimes to hold it together, but an image. So she had this image with what was it? There were 4 trees, and that's right. They represent the ancestral line, the mother, father, mother. People can start to kind of put it back together, and they may miss some elements, but you give them the kind of boom. There's the context of the whole thing. Visually, they get to see it, and it's wonderful. Zena was saying, gorgeous. Cleta saying, thank you, and yeah, Zena saying it's also something I can share with my clients. Yes. For example, showing Larisa's model to my clients, right? Well, and don't we all do this? Not just our own maps, but we have other people's maps where it's like, this person already did it. It's so much better than I can do it. It's like you didn't invent the 7 chakras, but you might in your work say, look, this is just a helpful thing that somebody else had. So these maps are a real gift to the world, or can be. And yeah, so let's move to wrapping it up. Are there any just last thoughts? Anyone burning to share? Any last? I suppose we'll probably just maybe move more into any appreciations or anything like that, or any aha moments you've had, any kind of lessons where it was like, oh wow, I'm leaving this session with this as a kind of idea. Is there anything?
Yeah, I really love the when you talked about we also have well ancestors. That kind of like almost made me cry, because I'm like, damn, of course I would have some well ancestors, and there are actually a lot of healers, because they're like pharmacists, the kind that still mix the medicine at administered medicine is half of my mom's lineage. So, but it really like emotionally really hit home. Like I'm always thinking about all the problems my ancestors had because of I'm from Germany, so 2 world wars and stuff. And I never connected to that idea that somewhere along the line, there will be people who were really well. So that really connected emotionally.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any things you're left with? Any kind of insights? Oh, and Jenny, what do you got there? You're muted. You want to share?
I'm just going for it. So thank you all. Yeah, I'm just going to love the work, Larisa. Love it. Such beautiful work. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and I'm gonna get cracking to bring my work to you in a diagram, all of you. So thank you.
So I just want to encourage everyone too that it doesn't have to be I think it did take a year of working on the map. There was also lots of life in that year, but it took a while. It took a minute to help it come together. And so if yours isn't coming together immediately, just know that's normal and that's okay. And also I was trying to distill like over 2 decades worth of work with clients and my own work, and it was a whole like cosmology that I was trying to display, and that it took a minute. But if I can do it, I have absolute belief that each of you can do it too. And yeah, just grateful to you, Tad, for sticking through that with me and for helping me actually end up somewhere that makes sense and that is beautiful and is so useful.
Oh boy, it's what a gift your work is to the world. And we've got somebody reading outside here. Yeah, tomorrow the Point of View 30-day starts. So of course you're all welcome to join in on that. And it's, it only happens once a year, but that'll be one of the big things we get to is this drawing out the map. But just the basic flow of it. Week 1, we talk about the route. What are the steps? We take people through. Week 2, the compass, like what are the core principles and ideas. Week 3, we're going to look at the map. I think week 4 is the message, and then week 5 is the kind of catch-all, clean up, and all of that. But I just so recommend doodling and talking with people. Does this make sense? Is this clear at all? Because people will point out the most obvious things that you wouldn't think about. They'll give you new insights to your own image, which is, anyway, so the more conversations you have about your point of view, probably the clearer your point of view will get. And to just trust your own sense of it. Some people will yeah, people will just disagree with you and agree with you, but to keep trusting yourself and how you see it and what makes sense to you, keep articulating it that way. You can change your mind over time. But yeah, Larisa, what a treat to know you and to know this work is in the world. Larisa, it's talking about the importance of a clear niche. I talk about her at so many of my workshops, and somebody says, I'm trying to give an example of a clear headline or a clear niche. I'm like, go check out Larisa Noonan's website and her thing. And what a gift. I mean, for all of you, sincerely for all of you, as your niche is getting clearer, it's such a relief for everyone else in the world, because I'll meet people who they realize, oh, I'm really stuck in the fundamentals. And it's like, what a relief. I have somebody I can send you to. That's what they do. We got Zena over there in Manchester in the UK and does work with, kind of in the corporations where there's so much narcissism. And I imagine it will happen at some point in my life. We're talking to somebody, so my boss is a fucking narcissist. Now, what do I do? And I could just see referring people to Zena and sending people. So it's what a gift. And it's not just me, but for everyone who knows about your work. It may never be a fit for them or useful for them, but it's gives you something you can give, which is, yeah, it's a gift to other people. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Larisa. Thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll see some of you at the 30-day.